They say that when there's no more room in the toy stores, the dolls will walk the earth. So last night I watched Child's Play, the original Child's Play from 1988, directed by Tom Holland. Now, this was a franchise that I didn't particularly grow up with at all. There was this really bad killing of a toddler in the UK in the early 90s by these two little boys, which was partly attributed to the fact that they'd been watching Child's Play 3 on home video. And this particular aspect of the murder was really jumped upon by the media. So the chances of getting to see a Child's Play film on TV in the UK and for the rest of the 90s was just absolute zero. And for all I know, they still don't show films on terrestrial TV in the UK even today. For people of a certain age who don't really understand horror, this franchise has got a reputation as being a real kind of down in the gutter, dirty, video nasty, of all video nasties that should be burned, you know, which is completely ludicrous, because I'm watching this film last night that the levels of gore are actually really tame. I mean, by today's standards, I wouldn't say this film is even average levels of gore. I mean, I get that this is just the first movie, and I think the worst of it, this franchise's reputation, is from possibly 2 and certainly number 3. So I'd be interested to watch number 3 to see what all the fuss is about, but I doubt it's anything particularly bad, really. But luckily the film is really good. I really enjoyed it. On the downside, I had to watch it on this piece of crap, which is a 2006 disc, which my TV couldn't really handle properly. I've got a 65-inch TV, and this disc would not fill the screen. It would only fill sort of the middle part, and there was this big black letterbox around the outside. And I messed around with the settings to try and get it into a full screen, which I did eventually, but it was just a bit blurry by that point. So I had to dial it back to kind of a smaller version. I'm guessing you cannot play this on anything more than a 40-inch TV, which was a little bit disappointing. But it's a bit like, have you ever been to the cinema where it's really busy and you end up in a seat like bottom right, and you're looking up at the screen thinking, oh, why did I come? I can't watch it on that. And then, but 5 minutes into the film, your brain adjusts and you totally forget about it. It was a little bit like that for me last night. Although, like I said, it's a really good film, so it was sort of easy for me to just forget that I was watching on this really compressed screen. So what's the plot about? It's about a killer doll, obviously, but I'll tell you a little bit more than that. So the film starts with this criminal being chased through the streets. He's called Charles Ray, and this cop's on his tail. So the criminal ducks into this toy store, and he takes a bullet from the cop. So at this point, he knows he's going to die. So he comes around the corner and there's this big pile of dolls, and he decides to transfer his soul into one of these dolls so that he can keep on living even after his normal body's dead. So he comes out with this big long incantation to make this happen. I mean, I had a really big problem at this point in the movie as to how he would know this incantation, because he just seems like your normal sort of dim-witted robber, and he's coming out with this massive long thing that sounds like it's just come off Supernatural or something. And it goes on a while. I mean, it's not like a simple incantation at all. It's not like, oh, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm dying, so please put me in that doll. It's like a really long kind of, and it goes on for ages. And the cop who shoots him and watches him stumble around the back of these dolls, instead of just coming forward and going, right, come on, put your hands up, Ray, it's over, he sort of hangs back behind this shelf as if he's still worried. I mean, he's just shot the guy in the chest. He's no threat anymore, and he's behind this shelf like, while this big incantation's going on, and I'm thinking, just go and arrest the guy. But obviously, for the sake of the plot, he needs to hang back and think about it for like 10 minutes. So, so Charles Ray ends up in the doll, and then the doll ends up eventually in the care of this young mother and her son, and the movie goes on from there. So I was expecting my big source of entertainment from this film to be from Chucky's sort of one-liners and things. I knew he had a reputation of saying lots of funny stuff and being really witty and a bit of a wise guy sort of inside a doll, but he doesn't really speak that much, and certainly not in this first movie. it feels like half the movie goes past without Brad Dourif, who plays Chucky, sort of saying more than he does from when he was a human at the start of the film. So there's a lot of tension in that, because you just don't know when he's finally going to speak, and when he does, it's kind of a little bit of a jump scare sort of thing that was really effective, I thought. So actually, most of the entertainment is not with the verbal side of Chucky in this first movie, but the fact that all the kills are really, really good. I mean, the amount of work that it takes to film a doll moving around and making that work on screen, you would think that the actual kill itself would be something really simple in the end, like, a simple stabbing, or strangling somebody with a cord or something like that. And there are bits of that, but the deaths are really elaborate, given the fact that they must have spent so much time making the doll work to then make the actual death scenes and situations really kind of as elaborate as they were. It was really impressive, actually. And the first kill in the movie doesn't make any sense at all, but once you get past that, all the other kills are just, I was really impressed. Like clapping at the end of it, I had really good setup and execution, and felt like really high budget as well. And it all builds to a finale that is one of the best horror finales I've seen for quite some time. It really amps it up, and really impressive. I could watch the finale again right now. It was that good. Chucky just keeps coming back like the Terminator, and every time that the makeup on the doll has changed a little bit because of the extra damage that he's taken, there's some really good practical effects with what they do with the doll in the last 15-20 minutes. Very, very impressive. So in terms of acting in the film, there's a lot of famous names in this film. When you couple that with the amount of money that was spent on the special effects, it feels like a really high budget film for what I presumed would just be, your standard 1980s slasher film. Brad Dourif, who I've already mentioned, who needs no introduction, very famous actor, probably not that famous in '88, I'm guessing, if he was taking this role. But he's carried on playing Chucky, as far as I know, in the years since, in all the various sequels. So, I mean, that is a great name to have as your main guy for your horror villain. Chris Sarandon plays the main guy, the lead role, the cop. I remember him from Fright Night in the 80s, and another film I watched in the 90s, which people have probably not seen a lot, but I watched it about 4 times. It was called The Stranger Within. He was in that as well. The lead woman is Catherine Hicks, who I'd sort of recognised her, and when I looked her up on Wiki, I realised that it's the same woman who was in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, which just happens to be a film I saw quite recently. So I've seen nothing else on her CV. So just by complete coincidence, I've seen 2 Catherine Hicks films in the same summer, which is kind of odd. But yeah, a really good array of actors, played very well. I'm not sure who plays the kid, but he was pretty reasonable. Although you can tell that this film completely belongs in the 80s, because the idea that a kid of 7, 8, 9, I'm not sure how old he is, would covet this doll, beg his mum to buy him this boy doll and sleep with this doll. I mean, come on, video games? 1988, with the Nintendo Master System, surely. Why does he want a doll? That's not going to be realistic. I mean, there's a remake for this film in 2019. I'm guessing that they changed the plot a little bit here, because, a kid in modern day, all he thinks about is wanting to buy a doll. Come on. And the hairdos as well, totally 1980s. The women in this film, they've got all them kind of frizzy hairstyles that they had in the 80s, and that make you just wonder how they managed to find a husband. So yeah, it does show its age a little bit in terms of that, but it's still really, really good on the whole. I just massively entertained. It's just a really, really good film. So I think if I'm going to swing my review axe, I'm going to give it a solid 4 bloody axes out of 5, which is an excellent rating. I factored in the fact that it's an original film. This first one, this is the one that started it all, so it gets points for originality. It's had a lot of money spent on it. Well, it looks like it's had a lot of money spent on it. I'm not sure the actual budget, but it's just very, very good. So I think 4 is a decent score. It's put me in the position where I do feel like carrying on and watching more of the films. As I understand it, number 2 has a reputation for being the best. So great, I look forward to that. Number 3, I'm curious to see how violent it is, because, its reputation in the UK and all that. So yeah, I'm very impressed with this film. Call me a new Chucky fan. So that's my review for Child's Play. Check out my playlist for other reviews, and I'll see you again another time. Goodbye.